is Dr. Kathleen Garland. She's here at the University of Houston Clear Lake campus, at least until May. So we'll let her introduce herself. But Kathy has been an integral part of the Texas Envirothon for many, many years, and we're very grateful to have her back this year. So thank you, Kathy, for being here.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. My presentation is on water, as you can imagine, as is everyone's today. But mine is a little bit different take, I think. I'm talking about water sustainability and water supply. And of course, this is something that non-point source pollution affects deeply. I'm going to talk about global issues. I'm going to narrow it down then to the US, and we're going to talk about some larger scale kinds of issues. And then I'm going to bring it down at the end more to the household and local level. But in order to talk about water sustainability, water is a global resource. And it is and all of you who are here, I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I do these presentations. It's like, you guys probably know more about this than I do. But water, of course, as a global resource is threatened. And it is one of the number one issues faced globally. I have a session I do in my undergraduate class. Actually, it's a film that I show them called Water Wars. And a number of world conflicts in recent times have ostensibly been about political issues. But if you scratch the surface, what you find is that it's resource competition over, in particular, water. And, one of the places that has happened is Sudan, also in Somalia. There have been arguments about how much of the conflict in the Middle East that goes on. And again, it has a lot to do with resources. That's, as Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. And we do see that. So this issue is a big one for us. And I wanted to talk about some of the main elements of it. So, there are lots of theories out there. This is not my specialty. I'm not an astrophysicist or an astrochemist. But there are many theories about where our water on Earth came from. And of course, water, if we didn't have our planet Earth didn't have liquid water, we would not be having this conversation. It is the source of life here, literally. And so our water is very, very old. Liquid water, we have evidence from zircon minerals that water was present on Earth in liquid form 4.4 billion years ago. And the theories about where it formed from is it was generated because there were internal magmatic processes in the Earth that generated hydrogen, which then combined with oxygen, that we were hit with significant numbers of cosmic asteroids and comets. Comets are all ice, and these were chondritic asteroids that were high in water content, and they impacted the Earth, bringing water with them. It's certainly true, and even is true today, that certain types of volcanic eruptions include a great deal of water vapor. So they literally spew water from the center of the Earth onto the surface. So there are these very highly reactive sources of water. But beyond those, we're not making any more of this. And then there's evidence that when the Earth was impacted by the meteor that caused us to form the moon, caused the moon to break off from the primordial Earth and form its own body, we lost an ocean full of water. A tremendous amount of water was driven off into space. So that's the last time we lost significant water. We still lose it a little bit in the upper atmosphere. Photolysis takes place there. And of course, we have a blanket of water vapor around the Earth. And some of that does break up, and hydrogen's very light, so it escapes the atmosphere. But for the most part, the water we have is the water that we're going to get. And that is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. I think a lot of young people don't understand that. But the bottom line is there is no new water. And if people talk about, we can desal the oceans. Well, all of us who do this know that the water cycle desalinates the ocean all the time, right? We evaporate water off the ocean, we put it in clouds, we drain it back onto the Earth as fresh water. It's a slow process. Desal just speeds that up. But we're not making water. We're just changing its salt content. So there's no new. We can think of that perhaps as new fresh water in the short term. But overall, there is no new water. And all water has been through the water cycle practically infinite number of times. So, every time you take a drink, who knows where that water used to be, a million years ago, but it might have been in a frog or in a plant or in a soil particle or in a leaf. It's all been somewhere. So this is the point of the whole talk here. We have to take care of the water we have because it's all we get. We don't get any more water. And we tend to treat it like it's an infinitely renewable resource, and it is just not. We can destroy our water. And so sometimes we want to do that deliberately. The process of electrolysis is the one we use if we want to make hydrogen and oxygen gases. We basically take water, hit it with electricity, and break down the molecule. But there's not that much of that going on, fortunately. But otherwise, we cannot really destroy water itself, but we can pollute it so badly that it cannot be used. And I wanted to show you all just one example of that you can share with your students. The gravity of what can happen is pretty significant. So this is a photograph of the Citarum River in Indonesia. And you can see that it's basically a floating garbage dump in the lower reaches. This river is badly contaminated. And this man whom you see sitting here on his boat, his whole livelihood consists of floating around, paddling around in this mass and collecting recyclables. And you can see plastics and tin cans and things in his skiff because that's his livelihood. But this river is in the lower reaches, it literally looks like this. It's unusable for any use. You can't use it for industry. You can't use it for drinking. And it's basically, again, because of poor management, right? It's poor management structure in that part of Indonesia. And we have uncontrolled industrial discharge from, the estimate is over 2,000 different manufacturing plants, and over 200 of them are textile mills. Textile mills have really nasty discharge, right? We talk dyes, we're talking chemicals, heavy metals that come from those dyes. So you have it really taxed by the industrial community. And then on top of that, you have upstream villages that don't have municipal trash collection or municipal sanitation. And so they're discharging raw sewage into the river, and the villages are literally going out there and dumping their trash in the river. So that's why you see all of this floating debris, because that's literally what they're using it for. And it's just, getting taken downstream. In addition, you have a lot of agriculture on this river. And so you have very high nutrient levels. Algal blooms are causing low dissolved oxygen. And the problem is that even though this water really shouldn't be used for anything, people are still using this water for drinking water and for crop irrigation. And so they're irrigating their crops with contaminated water, which is contaminating the crop. And that's particularly true for rice. And Jakarta uses this river for its public water supply. So our modern water purification systems cannot remove many of the chemicals that are in this water. And so it's just being recycled into the people who are using it, because there's a limit as to what our systems can remove. And this one exceeds it. So just an example of how basically poor practices, large population, a government that cannot manage all of its citizens' waste leads to really loss of a very large water resource. So this is in the United States. We're talking about non-point source pollution. We're talking about better water management. And the reason I put this diagram up here is because if you look at it, 45% of fresh water withdrawal in the United States goes to thermoelectric power, meaning basically cooling. So not hydroelectric, but thermoelectric. So it's basically cooling towers for gas and coal plants and nuclear plants. 32% of it is going to agricultural irrigation, which means that we as individuals have very little control over about 77% of the water withdrawals in the United States. So we as individuals have some impact on what's happening to the 12% that's in our public water supply and the very tiny percent that is in self-supplied domestic. Aquaculture using about 3%. Mining, we don't have any control over that either. The mines have to do that themselves. And self-supplied industrial, meaning they pump it, use it. All of that is out of our control as individuals. So when we talk about practices where we can impact both water quality and water quantity, we're dealing with a very small part of where changes can be made that impact how much water we use. And so that's what this diagram shows us, is that we have a small part of the overall impact. And that is one of the reasons I say we need larger scale interventions here, interventions in the agricultural industry, interventions in the power industry. Because if we don't have those, we're not impacting the system very much, but we do what we can. In terms of households, this is what we use it for. And this is from 2016. As you can see, about a quarter of the water is used in toilet flushing. We take showers. We use all the other faucets in the house. We wash clothes. Other uses includes your dishwasher and washing your car and all of those sorts of things. Although washing your car is probably a faucet use. And then about 12% of it is leaked away. I can attest to this. I have an ongoing leak at a toilet in my house that I've already paid to fix once, and it didn't work very well. And a lot of water is wasted, which gives us a big opportunity to conserve water simply by maintenance. But all these other areas are places where we certainly can make changes in our household infrastructure that will help us save water, period. This is a diagram or a map here of the colors show us how much water per day per person is used in each state. And you can see on the left side, right up in here, you can see the different ranges, right? So dark blue states, people use greater than 151 gallons per day per person. You get down here in these really pale colors, the very pale green, which as far as I can tell is the one and only state of Vermont. Oh no, Vermont and Connecticut, they're very conservative up there. They only use 35 to 50 gallons of water a day, but everybody else is ranging, from 50 up to, up to greater than 150 gallons per day per person. And the reason I put this up here in map form is because of the next slide. So what I want you to notice here is that, the north central states, the Northeast, a little bit of the South, tends to be, pretty reasonable in terms of water consumption. But when we get out here to the West, we have a lot of high water use. The other thing I want you to notice is these percentages, and these percentages are population growth in which states. So you'll notice that out here in these states, which are really high water consumers, we also have really high population growth. People are moving to these areas. So Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming. I don't know that a lot of people actually are moving to Wyoming. It's only got 17%, but 42% population increase, 47% in Colorado in a 20-year period, 40% growth in Arizona, 55% growth in Nevada. And Nevada is one of those things where a percentage, but when we always say, 0%, 10% of 10 is one. I still don't think they have a huge population, but some of these other states are growing, and particularly Idaho, Colorado, Arizona, and then of course California, and then the Northwest. Lots of population growth in those areas and high water consumption in them. And then if we look at the next map, what you'll see is that this compares these two. You'll see that that's the part of the United States that's most water stressed. So we have high consumption, we have high in-migration to these states, and we have high water stress. And that's a bad combination for the future of water stability and water sustainability in the southwestern United States. Just one interesting little factoid here. North Carolina is a really popular place for people to move to. Lots of people retire to North Carolina, but over here you'll see that they do have a pretty big population increase, but they really don't use very much water. Whereas, Florida, highly water stressed, large population increase. So yeah, we have a problem here. And this comes down to personal decisions. Where do you want to live? And how are you going to live once you get there? And the big problem here is that people who are moving to these states from these states, and a lot of them are coming here with the water habits that they developed in a water-rich part of the country. So, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. There's good groundwater, lots of surface water. People are not particularly worried too much about water conservation, although to some extent everyone is, but they're not. And then, they move to Colorado, and all of a sudden they're taking 15 and 20-minute showers. And one of the big ones that just makes all of us crazy is, people move to Phoenix and they want to have a green lawn and play golf. And that's requiring a tremendous amount of water that is going into irrigation, personal irrigation. And everybody wants a swimming pool because it's hot. And it's like a lot of that water is being lost just through evaporation to the atmosphere. So we see this big migratory effect of people taking bad, just non-conservative water habits from water-rich areas and moving them to areas that are really water-stressed to start with. So this is an issue that we have to deal with, and we're not dealing with it. I mean, we have absolutely nothing in place to address this particular kind of issue. One of the ways that you can share with your students to look at how much they actually use is to use a water footprint calculator. Water footprint calculators, at least the one I'm giving you here, include both indoor, outdoor, and virtual water consumption. And that so is the water we consume, evaporate, and pollute in our daily activities, as well as the water that is embedded in our products. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. I'll take you out to the website very quickly if it will work. This is actually a really cool website. I encourage you to share this one with the students. And it talks about what a water footprint actually is. And it talks about, the water that we use to produce food, to make energy, to manufacture all of the products that we use. Young people especially don't think about this. They think water comes out of a faucet. They don't look at a pair of jeans and think about how many gallons of water it took to make that pair of jeans. This is a great website. And as you go ahead through here, it talks about our blue water footprint of something, the gray water footprint, and the green water footprint. There's a water footprint of food to look at how much water is consumed by producing certain kinds of foods. I actually do a session on this in my classes because I just loved people thinking about how much water it takes to produce a pound of beef or a pound of corn or, a pound of tomatoes. So a great website. And then down here is the calculator, and it allows you to go through and it asks you simple questions and helps you calculate your water footprint. So really like this website. And I think it would be fun to share it with the students and also quite useful. There's a lot of education in using this particular website. Very well done. So check it out for them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about virtual water because I think it's a very important concept for people, for students to understand as soon as possible in their lives. As I'm sure all of you know, we have direct water use, which is the water we see ourselves using, cooking, washing, flushing, drinking, the water you boil to cook your eggs, the water that you boil to make your tea, everything. It's very visible, the wash water, all of those things. But indirect water is, again, something that requires thought and understanding of the processes behind the things that we use. And it's in everything. It's used in production of all sorts of products, growing, raising food. It's in sourcing our energy that we use all the time. It's behind transportation and the making of those things which create transportation for us. And I think the important thing for students to understand is this concept of water, virtual water being exportable. Best example I can always think of is when you export a ton of tomatoes from California to Texas, you're exporting the embedded water to Texas. And so all of the water that was used in growing that product, plus all the water that's simply in that product itself, that resource is exported to the place that you sell it. And this export of indirect water is a way of straining the water resources when virtual water is coming from a water-stressed region, for example, like California, to a more water-rich region like South Texas. That's poor water management at the economic level and at the national and sometimes international level. I mean, ideally, we would grow water-rich crops in water-rich places and export them to water-poor places, thus not taxing the water resources in those water-poor places. So we would grow tomatoes in South Texas and we would ship them to Central California, as opposed to the other way. And of course, many parts of the world, including Texas itself, grow highly water-rich crops in very water-stretched parts of the state. And if you go to Amarillo or Lubbock particularly, you're going to see immense irrigated fields of cotton. Well, I don't think they're using all that cotton in West Texas, right? They're moving that cotton all over the country and all over the world, and they're literally mining water resources to do that. out of and in particular, we mine the Ogallala Aquifer in that part of Texas. So we're doing some things that are non-sustainable, and that is not sustainable. There is only so long that we are going to be able to do that. If you've looked at the map of the Ogallala Aquifer, it's extremely depleted already in West Texas, and it's just getting worse because we're doing that. But the fact that people don't even understand this concept means that at the highest levels of government, you can't even talk about it really because they don't understand what you're talking about. What do you mean water is exported? It's in the ground, it's in the river. What do you mean? We're not putting it in a pipe and sending it there. How could it be being moved? So the idea that it goes on a truck or a train car is pretty foreign. But it's a really important concept, I think, for people to understand in terms of long-term water sustainability. So that's one of the things that I talk about here is that, on a global scale, water knowledge is something we really have to extend, especially to less privileged countries, many of whom are very water rich and many of whom are exporting a heck of a lot of water to the rest of the world. And we see, for example, a lot of rice production being outsourced to Africa. The Japanese export a lot of rice production to other parts of the world, and then they bring the product back into their country. If they're doing that to a water-rich area, that's great. But if they're doing it to an area that needs to raise that rice using groundwater extraction beyond the recharge limits, they're fueling water mining in other parts of the world. Here in the United States, we have for decades and decades needed a complete overhaul and a national water policy, and we do not have that. We have left water policy to the states, and the problem with water policy at the states is that water crosses boundaries with no knowledge of states. Frankly, it crosses boundaries with no knowledge of national boundaries. And the other thing, and we've seen, in the northern United States, right, the St. Lawrence River is the boundary between the US and Canada. In the southern United States, the Rio Grande River is the border between Mexico and the United States. We've done this all over the world where rivers are borders, which means that you've got two countries competing over the use of water in that resource, and everybody wants it for themselves. So it causes conflict rather than cooperation. And we do cooperate, but it's when we do cooperate, it's tense and fraught because water is so valuable. But at a national level, I mean, we really need to draft a water policy that stops subsidizing cotton in Lubbock, which of course everybody in Lubbock will hit the roof over, and starts subsidizing it in places where we have water. The places we originally grew cotton, which is in the southern states, they have more water than the western states. Urban growth in arid environments, Phoenix and Las Vegas, the sprawl is literally going to end in disaster there. And you're going to wind up with water rationing in those areas. And I think my children who are 30 years old will see that. We need better water policy. Of course, quantifying the impact of climate change on our water resources, how that's changing the amount of water that is in the water cycle, where it's going, how much evaporation is happening. That needs to be spoken to in terms of our national water policy. And then we need to understand that groundwater crosses borders too. It crosses state borders. And we haven't even in most states quantified our groundwater resources. We don't know how much we have. And when I worked in New Mexico 30 years ago, the state engineering office was trying to get a handle on basin by basin assessment of how much groundwater was available in the state. And they still haven't done it. It's really hard to get a handle on that, but we have new tools. We have new data sets. This is something that we should be looking at. Currently, state law also needs to be modernized. Our state water law is archaic. It's a combination of the riparian water law that we inherited from Great Britain when the Eastern United States was colonized, and then the Western policy of water rights and seniority. So most water law in most states is one or the other, or maybe some combination of both. Texas has its own water law when it comes to groundwater, and that's the law of the biggest pump. He who pumps the fastest gets the mostest. And that completely disregards the fact that water resources cross property boundaries, they cross state boundaries, they cross international boundaries. And states, again, there's so much money in water. The lobby which governs use of water, which tends to be things like mining, industry, and agriculture, are so powerful that none of the states have addressed this issue. And meanwhile, we are mining our groundwater and we are exporting our groundwater and surface water from water stressed regions to water rich regions. And then locally, what we need to do is, again, raise local household awareness of how valuable water is and what people can do at home. And most of what you can do that conserves water, of course, reduces non-point source pollution. Because if you're not using the water, you're not polluting it. So the more water we can conserve, save, keep in our water cycle, as opposed to bringing it in for public supply, the cleaner the water stays. Unless somebody's industrially polluting it, which of course, and all that non-point source from agriculture and roads and all of that, which, yeah, Jenny gave you all of that. So there's a lot of things that households can do. And I put fixing leaks last, but it's really top of mind around here because, oh my God, I got to get that water leak fixed. Checking for leaks, repairing them, keeping your plumbing. These days, there are smart water meters, and all the different water authorities want you to have a smart water meter. And what it does is it provides both you and the water authority with data on timing and amount of water use, and it also tracks leaks. So it can let you know you're away, and all of a sudden your water use goes way up. There's a problem at your home, and you could be notified that you need to get somebody there, or you need to get there and check and see what's leaking. Some states and communities give away low flow toilets and shower heads. I know the city of Houston actually did that for a while. They had a program for low income families that if you needed to replace your toilet, they would give you a low flow toilet to have and install it for you, which was a really awesome program. And I don't know how many times my kids came home from school with a new low flow shower head that they wanted me to install. Literally gave it away in class. So low flow fixtures are a big help. They reduce our water use, and you get used to them pretty quickly. They exchange water pressure for water flow, and that's a nice exchange. Although rain shower heads have become pretty popular, and they're not low flow because just having the water sort of rain on you is, you could use a lot of it that way. Gray water systems, these were much more popular in the East. I don't know many people here who have them, but people who put together systems or could install systems that reuse the waters from sinks and dishwashers, showers, which is mostly fresh water. It has a little soap in it, and reuses it throughout the house in terms of flushing toilets. And then outdoor irrigation, so you can rig it so that it will be used to irrigate the garden and the lawn, so that you're not using fresh water for this. And one of the things I like to mention is that the University of Houston, when it was built, put in a reuse water system. And if you do ever come to campus, you'll see these purple manhole covers and purple fittings all over the place. And this system literally runs from the local wastewater treatment plant. They pipe part of their effluent over to the university, and we use it to water the grounds, and have for 50 years, which is pretty cool. Composting toilets are a system that's been around for a long time. My grandparents had this. We called it an outhouse. They're much more modern now, and they're much more technological, but they do the same thing. They handle, household sanitary waste without water flushing. Sometimes, the idea that we use water to flush our waste away in other parts of the world, people are like, you do what? You do what? An awful lot of fresh water goes to washing away things we don't like to see. We need to make that as water conserving as possible. We can make smarter choices about virtual water. And some of that is buying locally grown food. This is local meat, local eggs, local produce that is used with, growing. These creatures are grown with local water, and you're not exporting the water to another place. So if we can buy locally grown, and I prefer to say to people, locally grown over organic when it comes to water source. Closer you are to the source of your food, the more water is being saved. Clothing, huge user of water and producer of pollutants. And the Sataram River is a great example of what textile production for the fast fashion industry can do to our water resources. Now we can get regenerative textiles, cotton and hemp, and other fibers that are grown in a way that reduces water use and restores soil health instead of depleting soil. Using natural fibers, wool, alpaca, cashmere, And if I hear those cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching sign in both of these categories. And I know, especially, for my students and college students and younger people with all of the high cost of living, it's hard to say that to them, don't buy fast fashion, don't buy cheap clothes. It's like, well, that's the only kind I can afford. I understand that, but when the opportunity arises and you can choose something that is more sustainable, do that. There are some plant fibers, linen, tencel, and rayon, not always produced sustainably, but they can be. And you need to look for those tags that say that they are. And then synthetics. Synthetics are a really interesting issue because synthetics use a lot of water to produce, but you can be recycled into themselves many, many times. And so you have kind of a chemical nutrient system here where this is William McDonough's words back in Cradle to Cradle, where he talks about the fact that you can kind of infinitely recycle the chemicals back into products. And while polymers can be like that and can be recycled, and you can buy things made out of recycled polyester and recycled plastic bottles and all of that, they do have some consequences. And that is that they generate fibers in the water, creating microplastic pollution. So on one hand, yes, it can be recycled. You can turn them over. In some ways, a highly sustainable decision. On the other hand, you have to be aware that when you wash them, you're contributing to a type of non-port source pollution that is very hard to capture. And I actually put in this part of the slide that there are filters you can put on your washer or bags that you can use in your washer that will catch those fibers and prevent them from going down the drain so that you can use recycled clothing more readily. Just not doing as much laundry. I do know people who wash their clothes every day after they wear them. It's like that is not necessary unless you are a field worker or you work out there, or a construction worker and you work outside all day. But if you're going to a job where you're sitting at a desk, you don't have to wash your clothes every day. Stop. You're just wasting water and soap. And you're damaging your clothes and adding fibers to the water system. So new fabrics are made not to have to be washed as often. I bought a pair of jeans recently, and there's a big thing on the inside of the jeans that come from Gap, and they're like, "Don't wash me that often. You don't need to wash me every day. Wash me on cold. Don't dry me." I mean, there's literally instructions printed on the inside of the pants about how you can be more sustainable in terms of you wearing those clothing. Clothing donations help a lot. Give away used clothing and shoes and household linens, fabrics, as well as hard goods like pots and pans and glassware and all of that. And then thrifting. Be willing to, and young people are masters at this. Be willing to take the time and go and find things that have had a previous life. And a lot of companies are now having worn wear websites where you can go to that particular brand and people are sending back their lightly used clothing to be reused because of size change, whatever. Patagonia does that. Toad and Company does that. More and more companies that are B Corps are doing that kind of reuse, resale. But you can also go to the thrift store. There are many things you can do to take care of the water in the house using biodegradable soaps and detergents. Instead of dryer sheets and water softener, throw some wool balls into your dryer to soften and take the static out of your clothes. It's actually much cheaper in the long run because like 5 of them cost $4 and they last forever. Reduce the use of harsh household chemicals. So vinegar and water can clean most things pretty effectively. Might take a little more wiping, but they clean very, very well. As Jenny mentioned, try to reduce or eliminate lawn fertilizers as much as possible. Consider xeriscaping your yard, and so putting parts of your landscaping that don't need water, and adding rain barrels to collect root runoff and using that for outdoor irrigation. There are so many ways we can take care of water. She listed a bunch. I listed a few more. There are myriad ways to do this. And I put this picture up because things like rain chains instead of gutters, that's what you see on the left. They're beautiful. And it replaces a downspout. And you can take a rain chain and put it into a nice rain barrel like the one in the middle, and you have a beautiful way of using your on-site rainwater. I have aspirations of trying to do this. The picture on the right is just a xeriscape landscape. And obviously this is in an arid area, probably someplace like Phoenix, but we have them right here in my neighborhood in South Texas. There are people who have done beautiful jobs of xeriscaping their yards. which is a combination of not having a lawn and then drought tolerant plants that are installed in that landscape. And this is a landscape that doesn't need to be watered and is very attractive, but it's different, right? It's not what we're used to. And so people have to adapt. And Wendy will tell you all about how she gets in trouble with the HOA regularly because of what she plants in her yard, because they're just really anti anything that isn't St. Augustine. It's pretty scary. The last thing I wanted to leave you with is just one of these cool school posters, because I just love the fact that we do have people teaching this in school. Teaching young people about water is so important. So I put on the right here my household water sustainability rules in very simple terms. Use less, use fewer things that pollute the water, make wise purchasing choices, and as much as possible, keep your water to yourself and don't let it get away containing things you don't want to have out in the environment. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to go back to any slides or answer questions.
Hey, real quick, how has the University of Houston campus implemented some of these new programs and ideas? Like more about like the conservation within the buildings and stuff like that. I know they're doing like the best management practices around it, but how about within it with conservation of students and education on that?
Well, fortunately, we've been able to educate facilities to some extent. And we have a new head of facilities who was actually pretty darn aware. So, for example, they redid the entire HVAC system. And the new HVAC system uses far less cooling water to evaporative cooling to cool the buildings. They put in a state-of-the-art system about 5 years or 6 years ago. And one of my students actually worked on it. He was working for a company that installed that. And so we have modified our HVAC system to use a lot less water than the old one used to use, which is a big deal because we have one of those buildings that has all the water pouring out. They use a water cooled HVAC system, and it's much better than the old one. So that's been a huge improvement for us. We actually use reuse water in all of our toilets. So all of the and that required some routing, but all of our toilets flush with non-potable water on the campus. We have in any new areas so the new buildings all have motion sensor fixtures in their bathrooms. The old buildings don't, but the new ones do because they're LEED certified or LEED certifiable buildings. So they have low flow showers, low flow faucets, and motion sensor water fixtures. So those are just some of the things we've done. They've put in water fill stations now in every building so you can fill a water bottle. So at least we're not generating quite as much plastic pollution, but we still have vending machines full of plastic bottles. So, and I do see a lot of them. But
Were they
there
more
are,
looking at it as a money standpoint or as an ethical
oh,
standpoint of both?
I think the answer is yes. I think what drives it is money savings that reduces their water bill. But at the same time, I do think that the idea that we demonstrate to our students how things can be done is important to this leadership, and they are implementing it as they can. So I think we have made some changes, which I've seen, and I've been there for 21 years now. I've seen those changes, and they are positive.
Do they coordinate with like student groups on them kind of becoming the promoters as well?
I don't know that they do.
Okay.
Surprisingly, we do not have a student group. I don't know. Rowena, do we have a student organization around environmental issues right now?
No, is the answer to that. We did at one point have the Institute for
Human and Planetary Sustainability.
Yes. I'm not sure how much sway they actually ever held over leadership, but unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I've kind of seen with even campus groups, they just come and go and they have other priorities and they all can't coordinate. So
we've had some strong student groups in the past, but it very much depends on the leaders of those student groups. And as you said, they come and go. So yeah. We did have a group a few years back who are into planetary justice, environmental justice, and they did a lot of work on campus. But, that once their leadership graduated, they kind of fell by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you.
And they were actually able to influence the leadership enough that we have an on-campus prairie, right? They built the prairie over at entrance number 2, but I don't know that it's being maintained now that they're gone.
It is being maintained.
Yeah.
And by EIH is doing it. There you go. Yeah, so we've got some extra prairie on campus because of what they did. They were very active, but again, because the leadership went on to bigger, better things, and we lost that. So, yeah, great question.
They have great ideas and they put it in and then they leave and they're like, oh, who's going to take care of this now that we're gone?
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
EIH. No, we're really happy to be a part of that prairie and entrance too.
Other questions? More questions?
I would just like to make a plug, Kathy, for native plants. You didn't mention that, when you talked about xeriscaping and low water use landscaping. Using plants which are native to your area should cope perfectly well with the water that comes from the sky without you adding any extra. That's my approach in my garden. It's not always homes and garden beautiful, but it survives.
Yes, yes. I need to take that to heart because mine does not survive. And I don't water it, so it just looks bad. Oh, but yes, I agree. And I know Jenny mentioned mentioned the power of native plants, and I was thrilled to actually hear her say that because that's it was just cool to hear that, and because of all that EIH has done around native plants and native plant sales, and getting us to use those.
Yes, Jenny always came to our native plant sales. She's gotten lots of native plants from EIH.
That's cool. That's cool.
Lots of clapping for Kathy. Thank you so much, Kathy, for always being so good and always willing to help us. We really appreciate it.
Well, I love it. And I'll be looking forward to meeting everybody at Stephen F. Austin at the end of March because I'll be there. So I'll be able to talk to all of the teachers and meet you and meet your students. And that's a highlight of my year. So can't wait. Can't wait to see you all. Meanwhile, work really hard, make them great. We know they will be. Thank you.